Senator Kitching.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. On Tuesday, the Treasurer said, and I quote, "The assumption is that every Australian who wants to get 2 shots of the vaccine will be able to by the end of the year." Does this remain the Morrison government's position?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thanks, Senator Kitching, for the question. As I said this morning on the ABC, our objective is to offer every Australian the opportunity to have a vaccine before the end of this year, Mr President. Mr President, the assumptions in the budget papers are very different to government policy, in that the objective, Mr President, is to offer all Australians access to a vaccine by the end of this year, Mr President. We have, as I said yesterday during question time, continued to grow and develop the vaccine rollout based on the availability of vaccines. As more vaccine supply has become available, we have expanded the vaccine rollout. We've commenced with stage 1A as we scheduled, and then we commenced the process in vaccinating those in 1B as we scheduled. We've brought on GP practices and vaccination clinics around the country to expand the vaccination rollout this week, Mr President. We're expanding the availability of vaccine.
Senator Wong, on a point of order.
Mr President, direct relevance. Senator Kitching put a very clear quote by the Treasurer about the budget assumption. The simple question to this minister is whether or not that remains the government's position. I'd ask him to return the question.
Senator Wong, you reminded the minister of the question. I was listening to the minister. If he is talking about the government's policy on this matter, you asked whether this remained government policy. Does this remain government policy? Government's position. Sorry, I don't think that substantively changes the point of order.
Rule on the basis of the question. The quote was, the Treasurer said, quote, "The assumption is that every Australian who wants to get 2 shots of the vaccine will be able to by the end of the year." Does this remain the Morrison government's position?
Okay, my apologies for getting the word position and policy juxtaposed, Senator Wong. You're quite right there. I do not believe, however, that substantively changes my ruling, which is that if the minister is talking about the vaccination policy of the government, you are asking me to frame an answer for him and put words in his mouth, and I can't instruct him how to answer a question. It was narrowly constructed, and I'm listening carefully, and if he's only talking about the government's vaccination policy, I believe that is covered and directly relevant to the question, even if it is to be debated after question time. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and it would be nice if Labor did listen to the answers that government members gave, because, Mr President, I have in my answer already directly addressed the question that was asked by Senator Kitching, Mr President, and I am providing additional information to the parliament with respect to the vaccination rollout, Mr President. As of close of business on the 12th of May 2028, 2,894,770 Australians have received a vaccination. That's 82,284 in the last 24 hours, Mr President. The vaccine rollout continues to gather pace as we have available more vaccines and has been controlled by vaccine availability all the way
Order,
through.
Senator Colbeck, time for the answer has expired. Senator Kitching, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. When asked this morning about the Morrison government's commitment for all Australians to have 2 vaccine doses by the end of this year, this minister said, and I quote, "That's never been part of our plans." Who is correct, this minister or Treasurer Frydenberg?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. As I said, I stand by what I said this morning. I stand by my words this morning. I stand by my words this morning, Mr President.
Order.
Mr President, and all Australians would understand that as the vaccination rollout has progressed, firstly, there's been the issue of supply, and as more supply has become available, we have made more available to Australians, Mr President. And once we understood the circumstances with respect to AstraZeneca and had the AstraZeneca vaccine available to us, which required a 12-week period between the first and the second dose, Mr President, that has had an impact on the rollout of supply of the vaccination rollout and, of course, the time at which people would have their first and second dose, Mr President. So, Mr President, we have continued, as we have additional access to vaccine, continue to roll out the vaccine. We've made it available to people through our various—
Order. Senator Colbeck. Time for the answers expired. Senator Kitching, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. In December last year, Minister Hunt said, and I quote, "We expect that Australians will be fully vaccinated by the end of October." Which of the three different positions is actually the government's position? This minister's, Treasurer Frydenberg's or Minister Hunt's?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. As I've said a couple of times already today, Mr President, our objective is to have offered every Australian who wants a vaccine one by the end of this year. Every Australian who wants a vaccine will have available one by the end of this year, Mr
Order.
President. So, Mr President,
Order.
Mr President, vaccination, Mr President, vaccination,
Order.
Mr President, is not compulsory, Mr
Order
President.
of my
Vaccination
left. Order.
is not
Senator
compulsory.
Colbeck, please resume your seat. I actually can't hear my own voice, and I have the only microphone that's constantly turned on. Please, a little bit more silence. Senator Colbeck.
Mr President, Mr President,
Order.
vaccination is not compulsory, and so our objective is to provide to all Australians
Order.
who want a vaccination to have one available to them by the end of this year. We will continue to make available vaccines to Australians in that context as we continue the vaccination rollout and as vaccines become available. As more vaccines become available, we will put more into the rollout and we will open up more phases of the vaccination process to Australians as we get access to the vaccine, Mr President.
Order. Senator McMahon.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister, representing the Minister
Order.
for
Sorry,
Employment,
Senator McMahon, I actually can't hear you. Order. Order. Senator Wong, please. I need to be able to hear Senator McMahon's question.
The Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, the fabulous Senator Cash. We are currently seeing many green shoots with our economic recovery. Can the Minister outline how the Liberal and National Government's 2021-22 budget is securing Australia's economic recovery and helping employ more Australians?
The Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I thank Senator McMahon for her question, and I acknowledge her deep commitment in particular to the Northern Territory and ensuring businesses stay in business and jobs are created. And certainly, Mr President, Australia entered the COVID-19 pandemic from a position of economic strength. Those opposite, though, prior to COVID, they like to talk the economy down, but it was performing strongly, as we know. For the first time ever in 11 years, the budget was in balance. We actually had workforce participation in Australia prior to COVID at a record high. In excess of 13 million Australians were in work. And of course, as Senator Ruston well knows, we also had welfare dependency at its lowest in a generation. That is something that we should all be very, very proud of. Mr President, because of the strong fiscal position that the government was in at the time, it enabled us to respond decisively in putting in place a $290 billion economic support package. In terms now, though, of the government's economic and fiscal strategy, the budget very much does set out the economic recovery strategy that we have, in particular by supporting a sustainable private sector-led growth and job creation. We are looking to drive down the unemployment rate lower than pre-crisis levels. And as we know in terms of workforce participation at this point in time, we still have now, even though we've been through COVID, more Australians are in employment than ever before. And in fact, the unemployment rate has fallen rapidly and is set to recover, Mr President, 5 times faster than the last recession in the 1990s. This is a government that is committed to putting in place the economic framework so that businesses can employ more Australians.
Senator McMahon, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, can you please tell me how is the Liberal and National government budget supporting regional Australians to get back into jobs now and into the future?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, supporting Australians in regional Australia, that is something that on the Liberal and National side of politics we are very, very proud to do. And certainly the budget that came down on Tuesday night, it is well and truly supporting regional Australia's economic recovery, helping to create jobs and, more importantly, to grow regional industries. Senator McMahon, around 43,000 Australians last year moved from the city to regional Australia because they appreciate the benefits that are afforded to them in regional Australia. The budget that we handed down on Tuesday night, it is investing, as we know, in infrastructure, regional infrastructure, right across the Northern Territory. This is all about, as Senator McMahon knows, making roads safer, reducing travel times, but at the same time supporting more than 900 direct and indirect jobs for Territorians. Again, this is a government that understands putting in place the right policy framework to create more jobs
Senator
for
Cash.
Australians.
Senator McMahon, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, over 947,000 jobs have come back into the economy since the trough of COVID. How is the budget continuing this jobs recovery?
Senator Cash.
And you're right, Senator McMahon. Almost 1 million people have now returned to work. Those jobs have come back into the economy since the trough of COVID-19. And that is something that we should be celebrating. Australians moving back into the workforce. And, Mr President, the 2021 budget, that is the next stage of the Morrison government's economic plan to secure Australia's recovery. The budget is all about creating jobs, because that's what this government does. We create jobs, guaranteeing the essential services that Australians rely on, but also ensuring that we build a more resilient and secure Australians. And certainly we are putting in place the policy framework to do just that. Personal income tax cuts, creating more economic activity, and when you create more economic activity, what do? You actually enable job creation. Business tax incentives to get businesses to invest in their businesses and to create more jobs. New apprenticeships, new training places. Again, this is a government that understands you put in place the right policy framework so businesses can prosper, grow and create more jobs for Australians.
Senator Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. Who was right? Minister Hunt, when he promised all Australians would be vaccinated by October, Minister Tehan, when he said the goal is for all Australians to have a dose by the end of the year, Treasurer Frydenberg, who promised every Australian will get 2 shots of the vaccine by the end of the year, Senator Birmingham, who says people will still be getting vaccinated next year, or this minister, who says fully vaccinating Australians this year has never been part of our plans. Minister, with 5 different positions I've just quoted, put by 5 different ministers, who is right?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health. Senator
Thank you,
Colbeck.
Mr President. As I said on radio this morning and as I said in the 2 questions that I've been asked today, the objective of the government is to have all Australians who want to have a vaccine, the opportunity to have a vaccine this year, Mr President. That's the objective of the government. As we have more vaccine available, Mr President, as we have more vaccine available, we will increase the availability to more people in Australia to get the vaccine. We started with stage 1A, Mr President, in February, then 1B in March, and we've continued to expand the rollout as we've had more vaccine available. The availability of vaccine has always been the constraint in the context of the rollout, and of course the rollout has also been guided by the medical advice, Mr President. So the medical advice with respect to the AstraZeneca vaccine, where there's a requirement for a 12-week gap between the 2 doses has had an impact on the process and the timing of the vaccine rollout, Mr. President. And if Labor were honest and hadn't spent all of their time trying to undermine the confidence in the vaccination rollout, Mr. President, they would acknowledge that. They would acknowledge that the availability of vaccine, the medical requirements and the advice of the health professionals which have guided the vaccine rollout have had an impact on the vaccine rollout all of the way through, Mr. President. And as we've had more vaccine available, we've made it available to Australians, and we have taken the advice of the medical and health experts in the application of the vaccine all of the way through. And that has required, Mr. President, some resets in the context of the vaccination rollout, Mr. President. And we've been quite open and we've been quite honest with the Australian people about that as those circumstances have arisen.
Senator
But, Mr.
Colbeck,
President, the Labor Party have not been honest.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Gallagher, a supplementary question.
I'll give the minister the opportunity to be honest with the Australian people. Will the minister now tell the Senate and the Australian people when will every Australian adult who wants a vaccine be fully vaccinated?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr. President, as I've said a number of times today, every Australian who wants access to a vaccine, our intention is to make that available to them by the end of this year, Mr. President. Mr. President, the time of their full vaccination will be dependent on when they take that up, Mr. President. And Senator Birmingham said recently that some Australians may still be getting vaccinated next year because that may be their choice, Mr. President. If they have the first dose of a vaccine that's made available to them late in December, Mr. President, they won't get the second dose of AstraZeneca if that's the choice of the vaccine they take up until 12 weeks later, Mr. President. They are the simple facts. Our intention, as I've said a number of times today, is to provide every Australian who wants access to a vaccine to have availability of that vaccine by the end of this year. I could not have been clearer, Mr. President. If the Labor Party don't want to listen to the answer, I can't help that, Mr. President. I have been very consistent with all of my answers today.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Gallagher, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 15 of Budget Paper 1 of last year's budget, the government said a faster-than-expected COVID vaccine rollout would boost the economy by $34 billion. Where is the estimate of the cost of the botched rollout in this year's budget, and what is it?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Clearly a budget assumption in last year's budget papers, and as I've explained to the chamber, the circumstances of the vaccine rollout have changed with the advice that's been given to us, the medical advice that's been given to the government with respect to the utilisation of the vaccine and the availability of vaccine, Mr. President. So we have continued to roll out the vaccine and make it available to Australians in the context of supply, Mr. President, and we will continue to do that. We will continue to roll out safely the vaccine to Australians, making available to them the opportunity to have a dose of the vaccine by the end of this year, Mr. President. We will continue to do that. Those things, the availability of the vaccination process will be contingent on supply, and as supply grows, we will make the vaccine available to more Australians.
Order. Senator Rice.
Thanks, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Foreign Minister, who I understand is Minister Birmingham. Minister, in recent weeks, violence has engulfed Israel and Palestine, following the threatened evictions of Palestinian families from East Jerusalem's Sheikh Jarrah neighbourhood and restrictions and violence against worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan. In the last few days, that violence has escalated. It's resulted in the deaths of 67 Palestinians and 7 Israelis so far. Minister, do you agree that this latest devastating outbreak of violence stems from the unlawful and unjust occupation of Palestine by the Israeli government? And isn't ending the occupation the best way to end the violence?
Minister representing the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. Mr. President, our government is deeply concerned by escalating violence in Israel, Gaza and the West Bank. We unequivocally call on all leaders to take immediate steps to halt violence, to maintain restraint and to restore calm. We also call on parties to refrain from unilateral actions that destabilise peace. The focus on all parties should be to return to genuine discussions as soon as possible. Australia has, Mr President, for many years supported a two-state solution, and this has not changed. We continue to welcome any initiative that can assist the resumption of direct negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians. We encourage the representatives of Israel and Palestinian representatives to enter into good faith negotiations and discussions. In relation to issues of settlements, the Foreign Minister issued a statement on the 1st of July 2020 urging all parties to refrain from actions that diminish the prospects of a negotiated two-state solution, including acts of violence and terrorism such as rocket attacks on civilians and land appropriations, demolitions and settlement activity. Australia regularly raises our position about settlement activity with Israeli authorities. Indeed, Prime Minister and Minister Payne have both done so. The Prime Minister has already said that settlements can at times undermine peace and contribute to the stalemate, and that indeed is why the government continues to urge parties to engage appropriately in
Senator
discussions.
Rice, Senator Birmingham. Senator Rice on a point of order.
On a point of order of direct relevance, I've been listening very closely, Minister, and my question was very specific. Isn't ending the occupation the best way to end the violence?
Respect Senator Rice. I think the minister was being directly relevant, given there was a preamble as well. And I'll ask the minister to continue. Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Mr President, I have stated the government's position and also stated in that regard the advocacy the government continues to make to Israel and to representatives of Palestinian peoples.
Senator Rice, a supplementary question.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister. Foreign Minister Payne's statement yesterday called for a halt to actions that increase tensions, including land appropriations, forced evictions, demolitions and settlement activity. Do you agree that these actions undermine progress towards a two-state solution? And can you confirm that the Australian government recognises that settlements in occupied Palestine are illegal under international law?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, we urge all that are involved in the current chain of violent events across Israel, Jerusalem, Gaza and the West Bank to cease provocations, to maintain restraint and to de-escalate the current exchange of fire and to halt the violence. The rocket attacks from Gaza into Israel are never justified and represent indiscriminate acts that fuel the cycle of violence and bloodshed. They must cease, and we do note that Israel, like any state, always has a right to self-defence under the UN Charter. That, Mr President, did not change the government's position in relation to the long-term importance of discussion between the parties and ensuring that the parties avoid all measures and matters that can escalate the chance
Senator
of conflict
Rice,
and violence.
Yes, on a point of order of direct relevance again. Again, it's useful background information, but my question was whether these actions that we're talking about undermine progress towards a two-state solution and whether the government recognises that settlements in occupied Palestine are illegal under international law.
Thank you, Senator Rice. I take your point. It was a question regarding the activities of one particular party. So I'll call the minister, remind the minister of the question, and he has 14 seconds remaining.
Mr President, I stress again, the current violence, the current disruption firmly undermines progress towards a two-state solution. It undermines peace and it threatens lives, and the government urges parties to desist from such violence and to return to discussions.
Senator Rice, final supplementary question.
No answer to my first two. I'll try with a third. Minister, what actions is your government taking, both publicly and privately, to end the violence and particularly address the root cause of injustices suffered by Palestinians, namely the occupation of their country? Will the Australian government recognise a Palestinian state as a matter of urgency?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. No, Mr President, the government will not. The government's position remains consistent, as it has been, in relation to supporting a two-state solution, urging parties to work towards that in their discussions, and, of course, were that to be reached, then further steps in that regard would be considered by the government.
Senator Watt.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development, Senator Reynolds. Queensland is the most decentralised state in Australia and in 2020 had the highest internal migration of any state. Can the Minister confirm that in Tuesday night's budget, Queensland received the lowest rate of new infrastructure funding per person of any state?
The Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development.
Where are the Nats?
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you very much, Mr President, and thank you very much, Senator Watt, for that question. What I can confirm is what the government has done in this budget, and again, it's a $110 billion pipeline of infrastructure projects around the nation over the next 10 years, including in Queensland. For example, the $400 million for the Bruce Highway Addition funding, and many other projects, Senator Watt. So, for example, the $400 million for the inland freight route from Mundagai to Charters Towers for the upgrades there, $240 million for the Cairns Western Arterial Road duplication, $160 million for the Moonala River interchange upgrade for packages 1 and 2, and an additional—
Senator Reynolds have Senator Watt on a point of order. Senator Watt.
Thank you, Mr President. On relevance, we didn't ask the Minister for a list of projects. We've all seen them. The question was specifically about whether Queensland received the lowest rate of new infrastructure funding per person of any state.
Ministers are provided with on the point of order, or sorry, I wasn't sure if you wanted to make a point of order, Senator Reynolds. Ministers are given 2 minutes to answer the question. The minister has been going for 40 seconds. I've allowed you to remind the minister of the last part of the question. I note the minister was speaking about matters related to the state of Queensland, which was covered in both parts of your question, but I'm listening carefully and she has 80 seconds remaining to answer. Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President, and I can confirm that this investment in Queensland is actually in addition to the $1.3 billion that was committed in the last year's budget, and that included projects such as the Coomera Connector Stage 1, the M1 Pacific Motorway upgrade, the Centenary Bridge upgrade, Currumbin Creek Road intersection upgrade, the Mount Lindsay Highway upgrade, the Beams Road open level crossing, the Riverway Drive, the Bruce Highway upgrade strategy. So Queensland is an integral part of this government's $110 billion infrastructure program, and Queensland, like all other states and territories, are being funded by billions of dollars and thousands of jobs.
Order. Senator Watt, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister confirm that of the infrastructure funding the Morrison government did allocate to Queensland, only 1% will actually start being spent before the next federal election?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, in addition to the infrastructure programs, of course, we have the city deals. For example, the city deal in Townsville, because this government is committed to making our cities more productive. So we're investing $381.7 million in the Townsville city deal, the Horton Pipeline Stage 2, the Port of Townsville Channel upgrades and the city deal job creation. So far from leaving Queensland behind, Queensland, across many government programs and infrastructure projects, is receiving billions of dollars from the federal government, which is creating thousands and thousands of jobs right across Queensland.
Senator Watt, a final supplementary question.
At the last election, the Morrison government committed to spend $287 million upgrading the Captain Cook Highway in Cairns, $195 million building a new water pipeline in Townsville, and $100 million upgrading the Linkfield Road interchange in the electorate of Dixon. But construction on those projects has not even begun. With this record of promises not being delivered, why should any Queenslander believe the government's new promises in this year's budget?
Order. Again, I remind senators, Senator Reynolds, take your seat. I'll call you when I can hear you. I will ask senators again on my right on that occasion to not interject while questions are being asked. Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you very much, Mr President. And there is a reason in this budget that we have made it use it or lose it provisions, because the state governments
regularly get allocated money from the federal government and do not spend it, as we have agreed. So, Senator talks about water projects. Well, in this budget, the Australian government's committed to an additional $7.5 million towards the Rookwood Weir, $500,000 towards the second stage of the Warwick recycled water and treatment upgrade, and there are many more. It is one thing for the federal government to allocate the money, Mr. President, but the state government has to deliver them. So I suggest that the question should be better directed towards the Queensland Premier.
Senator Hanson, order.
Have you got her number?
Order. Senator Hanson.
Thank you very much. Actually, I can answer Murray Watt's question there. Get the Labor Party out of the way from roadblocking a lot of the federal government funding in Queensland. That's what you need to do.
Senator Hanson,
right,
you're running down your own clock.
I know. My question is Senator Birmingham, representing the Prime Minister and Treasurer. The State Grid Corporation of China is a 60% shareholder in a foreign-owned company trading as Gemina. Gemina owns electricity generation assets and is the second-largest owner of Australia's gas pipelines, including gas pipelines in Queensland. Gemina pays no tax in Australia because it says it has borrowed at 10.5% from its parent company. Gemina says it is subject to an ATO audit for transfer pricing because of this arrangement. Despite a serious trade war with China, Gemina is seeking funding from the Northern Australia Infrastructure Facility for the proposed pipeline from Mount Isa through the Galilee Basin to Roma. My question is, how much money is the federal government planning to loan to the Chinese government so China can own critical infrastructure assets in Australia?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. I thank Senator Hanson for her question. It's a serious question in relation to the protection of critical infrastructure and security assets across Australia, and indeed our government has moved in successive points over the years to make sure that we tighten areas of foreign investment laws, that we ensure, for example, that asset sales by state or territory governments that previously were not captured for foreign investment approval processes are now captured under those processes. Through our security of critical infrastructure reforms, we've also put in place new measures and are strengthening those measures even further in relation to how it is that crucial critical infrastructure assets, such as our energy systems and communication systems, are appropriately protected from risks in relation to cyber attacks or other types of attacks that could undermine their operations and, through that, the nation's security. Senator Hanson, you raise questions in relation to an apparent application to the Northern Australia Infrastructure Fund for a particular project. In relation to that particular project, I would give you the assurance that our government will make sure that all security implications are considered. The minister has a power of veto over final decisions under the Northern Australia Infrastructure Fund, and of course, in relation to matters of security concerns, would, if appropriate, use that power.
Senator Hanson, a supplementary question.
Thank you very much. Foreign powers are avoiding government review under the Foreign Acquisitions and Takeover Act of 1975 by starting new businesses, like the proposed Gemina pipeline through the Galilee Basin. When will the government plug that loophole?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. A couple of points to that, Senator Hanson. One is the security of critical infrastructure reforms that I have outlined do have a reach around areas of licensing and other factors that can allow government to control those who operate in certain sensitive sectors like the telecommunications industry and like parts of the energy sector. I would also note that the reforms to the foreign investment and acquisitions laws that we have outlined and introduced include measures that ensure where a company has been granted approval to operate in one sphere and then uses that to expand into areas that may be sensitive and would be contrary to Australia's national interest. There are now call-in powers that the Treasurer can exercise and can withdraw certain rights and approvals to companies if they do so.
Senator Hanson, a final supplementary question.
Energy Australia, owned by China Power and Light, is reported to be receiving an early Christmas present from the federal government in the form of a $5 million gift card to help pay for its new Tullawarra B gas power plant, so it will be hydrogen ready. How much does the federal government plan to gift to foreign-owned companies who don't pay tax in Australia?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, the question touches on a few points. Certainly, our government continues to pursue measures to ensure energy security across Australia, to ensure that we do have a reliability of supply, and that indeed requires at times the driving of investment decisions forward in relation to generation of new energy in certain sectors. However, Senator Hanson, in relation to the particular grants or supports, I would emphasise to you that we always make sure that companies are operating within Australia's laws, and indeed our government has taken various steps over the years to make sure that global tax avoidance measures have been taken in Australia, that we tighten those laws, and we are in fact yielding some billions of dollars in additional tax revenue as a result of measures that have been taken to tighten areas of global tax avoidance.
Senator Van.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Senator Seselja. Can the Minister outline how the Morrison government's 2021-22 budget secures Australia's energy needs, secures Australia's economic recovery and protects jobs in our regions and in our cities?
Minister representing the Minister for Energy and Emissions Reduction, Senator Seselja.
Well, thank you, Mr President. I thank Senator Van for the question. And yes, I can. The Liberal National Government is securing Australia's recovery with investment in more than $1.8 billion in the 2021-22 budget to boost jobs and to support affordable and reliable energy. Now, through our technology, not taxes approach, this year's budget will continue to provide reliable, secure and affordable energy to all Australians, and to increase investment in technology solutions to reduce emissions in a way that supports jobs and economic growth. Australia's competitive advantage has always been based on cheap energy, and gas will be central to our ongoing economic recovery. We're advancing our gas-fired recovery and ensuring that Australian gas is working for all Australians, with $58.6 million to support new initiatives. We're taking action in 3 key areas to boost the East Coast gas market across the entire supply chain. We are unlocking supply, delivering an efficient pipeline and transportation market, and empowering gas customers. We've delivered on the National Gas Infrastructure Plan interim report, which shows that both local production and new infrastructure is needed to alleviate the forecast shortfall in southern states. Now, the government can't sit back and allow the gas shortfall to eventuate. It would have a devastating impact on the economy. That's why we're backing the critical projects through $38.7 million of targeted support. Without the action we're taking to address supply, industry and households will be faced with higher prices from price-gouging energy companies and more blackouts, just as South Australia experienced in 2016. On this side, we understand that gas is a critical enabler of Australia's economy. It supports our manufacturing sector, which employs over 900,000 Australians, many in the regions. Gas will be critical to providing the dispatchable and affordable power generation we need to keep prices down, while also deploying new technology into the system.
Senator Van, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. How is the government investing in our regional industries and supporting job creation across Australia?
Senator Seselja.
Well, thank you. Our investments in this year's budget will create more than 9,000 jobs across the country, grow our economy and ensure Australia continues to meet and beat our international commitments. And I know Senator Whish-Wilson will be very pleased with that. Through the 2021-22 budget, we are investing an additional $275 million to accelerate the development of an Australian hydrogen industry. And this new funding will increase the government's total support for a hydrogen industry to over $845 million. This package will support an additional 4 regional hydrogen hubs. This is in addition to the $70.2 million committed in last year's budget for the first hydrogen hub. And we'll look far and wide around the nation for potential hub sites from the Eyre Peninsula in the south to Darwin in the north. And together with our investments in carbon capture and storage, this will create around 2,500 jobs, delivering on our technology-led plan to secure the economic recovery and continue the jobs growth.
Order. Senator Seselja. Senator Van, a final supplementary question.
Can the minister advise of other measures in the budget that will ensure all Australians have access to secure, reliable and affordable energy, and is the minister aware of any risks to this approach?
Senator Seselja.
Well, thank you. Unlike those opposite, Liberals and Nationals understand that delivering affordable, reliable and secure energy is absolutely critical to protecting jobs and securing Australia's recovery. That's why our budget funds new gas generators and invests in the technologies we need to lower prices for families and businesses. Now, what's Labor offering? Just what their Greens counterparts would like. They only have a recipe for more taxes, more power blackouts and higher prices. They've got Chris Bowen in charge of energy policy, who's never seen a tax he didn't like. They've got Murray Watt, who continues to pretend to support the resources sector. They are completely divided when it comes to the role of gas in the system. They apparently have an energy plan for 2050, but not 2030. They simply can't be trusted to deliver the reliable, affordable energy Australians deserve. We reject Labor's attempt to hoodwink Australians. Australians know that it'll be technology, not taxes, that will secure our recovery, and that's exactly what this—
Senator Hanson-Young.
Thank you. My question is to Minister Birmingham, representing the Prime Minister. Tuesday's budget was a shocker for the planet. With just 0.3%, 30 cents in every $100 of budget spending dedicated to addressing the climate crisis, and just 0.2% of the budget, 20 cents in every $100 dedicated to the environment is suffering. Why did the Morrison government make the environment and climate change the biggest losers out of this year's budget?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, Mr President, I do completely reject Senator Hanson-Young's question and assertions in her question. I invite Senator Hanson-Young to take a look at the ocean strategy outlined in the budget and to see the measures there, measures indeed consistent with a blue economy. I invite her to take a look at the waste reduction strategy there, measures consistent with our government's action to ban the export of recyclables and waste from Australia. I invite her to take a look indeed at the climate and emissions reduction measures that are there, outlined in detail, and, Mr President, most importantly, delivering results that are ensuring we are avoiding, according to the forecast of our emissions, we will avoid in the order of 250 million tonnes of emissions each year by 2040. This is building on the fact that we have continuously met and exceeded our nation's commitments. We expect to see around $20 billion of investment in low-emissions technology over the decade to 2030 as a government, helping to secure around $80 billion in total investment from the private sector and governments. It's working, it's meeting and beating our targets, and we're committed to policies that will continue to do so.
Senator Hanson-Young, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Funding for biodiversity protection has fallen under this government since they were elected in 2013 by 28%. Spending on biodiversity is to fall over the next 3 years to make it half of what it was in 2013. How many more native species and members of the Australian wildlife family will be extinct before this government starts funding biodiversity properly?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, Mr President, we're going to continue to invest in those areas that are essential towards our environmental protection. I don't accept the assertions in relation to the way in which the Greens have made their own budget calculations. It will come as little surprise to anybody that I'm not accepting the assertions or the ideas that the Greens' budget calculations are likely to be accurate, truthful or honest. So, Mr President, I give the commitment that our government continues to invest practical environmental initiatives to improve our landscape across Australia, to protect our oceans, to deal with waste and to reduce emissions.
Senator Hanson-Young, a final supplementary question.
Minister, why does this budget do nothing to save koalas from extinction by 2050? Why does this budget do nothing to save swift parrots from extinction? Why does this budget do nothing to protect platypus, quolls, pygmy possums, potteries and the hundreds of other species that are left on the list? Our wildlife is suffering and you are doing nothing.
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, that's just not true. It's a falsehood from the Australian Greens, and yet another one indeed, Senator Abetz. It's unsurprising to anybody on this side of the chamber or to anybody who has heard the Greens over the years claim, of course, endlessly, that things aren't happening when in fact they are. We've all heard the Greens say that we wouldn't meet any of our emissions reduction targets over the years, and yet, of course, then each time we do meet them, we do exceed them. And so the Greens say this endlessly. Yes, we take very seriously the importance of wildlife protection, preservation, of course, of endangered species, and the pursuit in relation to measures and policies to help support them is one we will continue.
Senator McCarthy.
Mr President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development, Senator Reynolds. Can the Minister confirm that 99% of new infrastructure funding announced on Tuesday for the Northern Territory is beyond the forward estimates?
The Minister representing the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development, Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I thank the senator for the question. And I can confirm that since 2013 the Australian government has committed more than $3.2 billion for infrastructure in the Northern Territory. And in the 2021 budget—
Senator Reynolds. Senator McCarthy on a point of order.
Mr President, my point of order is that we're talking about beyond the forward estimates.
Thank you. The minister's been speaking for 13 seconds. I'm listening carefully to the minister's answer. You've reminded the minister of the conclusion of your question. I will listen carefully to the minister's answer. I call her to continue. Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And my key message is that there are many different programs across the federal budget over multiple budget years that are putting money into the Northern Territory. So not only are the city deals, for example, for the City of Darwin is a 10-year partnership, and that's $320 million. In this budget alone, we've got $150 million for Phase 2 of the Northern Territory National Network highway upgrades, $173 million towards a 6th corridor under the roads of strategic importance, and $3 million for a development study for a proposal of Tennant Creek.
Senator Reynolds. Senator McCarthy on a point of order.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. Point of order on relevance. The question is beyond the forward estimates.
So, I have been listening carefully to the minister's answer, and I've allowed you to specifically remind her of that. If a question asks about a matter in the budget paper in a portfolio area, the minister is constraining her comments to, in essence, infrastructure projects in the Northern Territory. If I'm being asked to insist that she uses words to address the point of order in the specific nature you make it, I believe I'm crossing the line into instructing a minister how to answer the question. The minister is not straying into broader commentary about alternative policies, but is speaking about infrastructure in the Northern Territory. I believe that is directly relevant. There is, of course, the opportunity after question time to debate it. Senator Wong on the point of order.
On the point of order, and I am not clear whether the minister is continuing to speak about the past, but what I would submit is that a question about the forward estimates and beyond, that an answer that refers to past investment is not directly relevant to the question. I mean, temporally makes no sense to suggest that you can answer a question about future spending only by referencing past spending.
I think, to be fair, the way I heard the minister answering the question was the minister was addressing and listing projects currently underway, not within the forward, not beyond the forward estimates. I think going into the territory of instructing a minister that in a portfolio area they can't talk about the budget to that degree of specificity is actually getting into the content. No, if the minister is talking about projects that are currently underway but they are within the forward estimates, there's an opportunity to debate whether the minister has answered the question to your satisfaction after question time. But I don't think I can say that's not directly relevant because there's no broader, because the minister is constraining her comments to that specific issue of that policy area. Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr President. And the point I was making is that we have been supporting the Northern Territory in a wide range of infrastructure projects for all of the budgets, I believe, that we've had since coming into government. And don't forget that we do this in partnership with the Northern Territory government. And in fact, we support projects that they put forward and that are shovel-ready. So I've just had a look here over the last budget and this budget. I can count at least 30 separate projects which are in various stages of construction, and some are in planning, some are approved, and they go out well beyond the forward estimates. So the fact that funding goes beyond the forward estimates is a good thing, because that means there is a steady pipeline of projects in the Northern Territory to sustain jobs, probably for at least a decade, if not more. So that, I think, is a great thing done by this government.
Senator McCarthy, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister confirm that 87% of the newly announced infrastructure spending for Victoria announced in this year's budget is beyond the forward estimates?
Senator Reynolds.
I'd have exactly the same answer as I did for the Northern Territory. There are very significant projects across multiple projects that have been funded in this year's budget. Again, it's done in consultation with the Victorian government in terms of the readiness of the projects and in terms of the duration of the project.
Senator McCarthy, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. On average, the Morrison government delivers $1.2 billion less a year on infrastructure than it promises. Last year, Mr Morrison delivered $1.7 billion less in infrastructure, and how much less than promised will be delivered this financial year?
Senator Reynolds.
Well, thank you, Mr President. And like many things those opposites say, that is simply not true. This government has got a $110 billion 10-year infrastructure program, and it is very clearly laid out in the budget, and we are spending more on infrastructure year on year. And we do that in partnership with the state and territory governments.
Senator Bragg.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Superannuation, Financial Services and the Digital Economy. Senator Hume, how is the Morrison government securing Australia's recovery by implementing policies to enable Australia to become a leading digital economy and society?
The Minister for Superannuation, Financial Services and the Digital Economy, Senator Hume.
Thank you, Mr President, and I'd like to thank Senator Bragg for his question, his enduring interest in Australia's digital economy and progress. Digital technologies play such an important role in our daily lives, but perhaps no more so than in the last 18 months. They've helped businesses to stay afloat, for people to interact and transact in new and different ways, and they've also enabled people to get access to life-saving and information and services. The Morrison government knows that getting the policy settings right now will ensure that Australia's prosperity continues over the next decade and beyond. And that's why, Mr President, I was incredibly proud to stand with the Prime Minister last week and announce the $1.2 billion digital economy strategy. This strategy is a living plan designed to ensure that we have the right infrastructure, skills, settings and services in place. It outlines our digital growth priorities. It will make it clear what we need to do to achieve that ambition, and they include things like lifting our digital capability and adoption across small and medium businesses to support new ways to work and grow, increase profitability and, of course, save time. For example, through a $15.3 million enhancement to uptake e-invoicing to save time and money for businesses, supporting globally competitive export sectors operating at the digital frontier, including manufacturing, mining, agriculture and construction, and, of course, building the emerging technology capability and accelerate the growth of tech startups such as fintechs, regtechs and digital games to drive an uplift in the rest of the economy. And this broad package, Mr President, has been received extraordinarily well. FinTech Australia CEO Rebecca Schott-Guppy said the announcement was welcome news for the entire technology and startup ecosystem. The BCA said that the digital economy was a win-win. The digital economy strategy is a win-win, and the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association said that the games offset, tax offset, a key part of that strategy, was one of the most significant to be implemented anywhere in the world.
Senator Bragg, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. How is the government investing in technology and skills to support job creation and economic growth following the COVID-19 pandemic?
Senator Hume.
Mr President, the Morrison government understands the importance of the digital technology to Australia's economic recovery, and that's why we've announced this $1.2 billion package to ensure that we have the right infrastructure, skills, services and settings in place to assure Australia's ongoing prosperity. For example, we're investing $124 million in AI initiatives to grow the next generation of AI experts and help small and medium enterprises leverage technology to boost productivity. We're investing $12.7 million into the expansion of the hugely successful and oversubscribed ASBAS program to ensure that 1,700 businesses get access to services that will help them grow and leverage digital technologies. And these are just a handful of the initiatives put into place to ensure opportunity, growth and jobs for all Australians now and into the future.
Senator Bragg, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. How is the government working to help people have greater control of their data?
Senator Hume.
Mr President, this is a matter very close to my heart. Empowering individuals and businesses to have better control and gain benefit from their own data that's collected by industry is an important part of the Morrison government's $1.2 billion digital economy strategy. $111 million will help accelerate the economy-wide rollout of the consumer data right, which will provide enormous opportunities for regtechs and fintech startups to drive competition, building new products and services to help consumers manage and understand their data and get better value from products and services providers such as telcos, banks and energy companies to save time and save money. And importantly, the consumer data right is delivered in partnership with industry and has privacy settings embedded into its design to ensure it's a safe and secure system.
Senator Farrell.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme and Government Services, Senator Reynolds. Yesterday, the Prime Minister said that the Australian Federal Police had given the go-ahead for Mr Gaetjens to resume his investigation into who knew what and when about the alleged rape of Ms Higgins in the Minister's ministerial office. Has the Minister been interviewed by Mr Gaetjens?
The Minister for Government Services and the National Disability Insurance Scheme, Senator Reynolds.
No.
Senator Farrell.
Thank you. Yes, I have another supplementary question, Mr President. Have any of the Minister's staff been interviewed by Mr Gaetjens?
Senator Reynolds.
Not to my knowledge.
Senator Farrell, a final supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Mr President. I do have a final supplementary. Can the Minister guarantee that neither she nor a member of her staff informed the Prime Minister or any of his staff of the alleged sexual assault prior to the 12th of February this year?
Senator Reynolds.
Senator Farrell, that really relates to the ongoing AFP inquiry that I addressed in my comments yesterday.
Order.
And I certainly have no desire to prejudice that investigation.
Order. Senator Patterson.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is for the Minister for International Development and the Pacific, Senator Seselja. Can the Minister update the Senate on how the Morrison government's budget will help create a safer, healthier and more prosperous Pacific region, and how securing the Pacific's recovery helps secure Australia's own recovery?
The Minister for International Development and the Pacific, Senator Seselja.
Thank you very much. I thank Senator Patterson for the question. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused immense disruption here in Australia and across our region. And our response is simple. We are supporting Australians and we're supporting our region. And through this budget, the government is investing in an open, inclusive and resilient Indo-Pacific region. Now, Labor is maintaining an outrageous lie that we have cut development funding in the budget. Let me be perfectly clear. We've maintained Australia's baseline $4 billion ODA budget, which will continue over the forward estimates, rising in the out years. And in response to the pandemic, the government is delivering $1 billion worth of additional investments over the years to 2023 24, over $800 million this year and next. We make no apology for the government front-loading these investments. Is Labor really arguing that we should hold off on supporting our neighbours at this critical time as they are dealing with? No, well, you got it wrong. You got it wrong. We're not going to take your advice and hold it back. Hold back the additional assistance at a time of crisis. The government has demonstrated again and again that we will allocate new funding in response to the need in our region. COVID-19 has created a highly fluid international environment.
McAllister.
And the government's temporary and targeted measures are exactly the right tool to respond to that environment. In the year ahead, we'll provide $262 million to support our region's vaccine procurement, $156 million to address the economic impacts of the pandemic. And in 2021, we delivered approximately $1.7 billion in ODA to the Pacific, over 50% higher than Labor delivered to the region when last in office. So we're not going to be lectured to by the Labor Party about our commitment to supporting our Pacific family and our Pacific neighbours.
Senator Patterson, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister outline how supporting our partners in the Pacific to tackle and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic as quickly as possible will support economic growth both in Australia and across our region?
Senator Selja.
Thank you. Thanks, Senator Patterson, for the question. The human suffering caused by COVID is immense, but equally its impact on long-term economic stability and security is also concerning. The government has committed $305 million to support economic resilience and recovery from COVID-19. Already $200 million has been dispersed to our nearest neighbours. In the year ahead, Australia will provide a further $100 million across the Pacific and Timor-Leste to maintain essential services and protect the most vulnerable. For countries like Fiji, which are highly dependent on international tourism, the shutdown of international travel has been absolutely devastating. We can help Fiji to get the virus under control and support its quick return to economic growth. I'll be speaking to the Fiji Health Minister today about our cooperation, and we'll be delivering more Australian vaccines to Fiji this week. We'll always support our Pacific family. A safe region means a safe Australia, and our support at this time is more important than ever.
Senator Patterson, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Can the minister update the Senate how the budget builds on the government's record investments in the Pacific, and can the minister outline the comprehensive nature of this government's engagement with our Pacific neighbours?
Senator Selja.
Thank you, Mr President. I can, and in doing so, we reject Labor's lazy approach to our engagement in the region. What those opposite don't understand is that Australia's partnership with Pacific nations extends far beyond the record ODA budget alone in the Pacific. Labor seems to believe that bilateral ODA remains the only way in which Australia addresses shared challenges in our region. By contrast, this government is using a range of economic tools to support economic stability and grow jobs in our region. We're providing bilateral loans to our most important near neighbours, PNG and Indonesia, at a crucial moment in their COVID-19 response efforts. The loan to Indonesia is part of our biggest package of economic support to Southeast Asia since the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. And this government has established the $2 billion Australian Infrastructure Financing Facility for the Pacific, which is helping to deliver strategically significant projects such as the Palau ICT cable project, the Markham Valley Solar project in PNG, and the Tina River Hydro
Senator
project.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Birmingham.
Mr President.
It started at 2:55.
Mr President, it did start at 2:55, and it being 2 minutes to 4, I ask that further questions be placed on notice.